will go ahead and get started now. I am Susan Ingalls. I direct Sustainable Furnishings Council. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this webinar, this Sustainability Essentials webinar, where we are privileged to have as our guests today Karla Magruder and James Ewell of Accelerating Circularity. I'm going to keep you all on mute. However, we do want to hear from you, so please send in your questions and comments via the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. And at the end of the presentation, we will go through your questions and respond to each one. I'm going to start by giving you an overview of our organization. Sustainable Furnishings Council is in our 14th year. We are nearly 400 companies that all have made a public and verifiable commitment to sustainability and to transparency and to continuous improvement. Since we began and to this day, our members include suppliers of materials that are used in making furnishings products, manufacturers of all sorts of furnishings products, stores where these things are sold, design firms, and importantly, environmental conservation organizations. World Wildlife Fund and Rainforest Alliance, for instance, were instrumental in getting us started and remain active with us today. When we started, our first job was to determine what are best practices for sustainability in the residential furnishings industry, and then to set standards for recognizing exemplary implementation of these practices. And then we got busy educating. And we are an educational organization more than anything else. We have a core educational program called Green Leaders, which is a certificate course. And so if you're interested in what we're talking about today and want to learn more about these issues in the furnishings industry, please consider getting involved with us as a member and/or by taking our Green Leaders course. As y'all know, sustainability is an umbrella term, and there are many, many issues that fall under this wide umbrella of sustainability. We do tend to be concerned about all of them, and we put our attention where we believe we can make the greatest difference the most immediately. So a lot of our work is around addressing climate change, around addressing the proliferation of harmful chemicals and the toxic waste that results, and around addressing waste reduction. In fact, the furnishings industry relates directly to the range of sustainability issues. As a global manufacturing industry, we are responsible for quantities of CO2 emissions that result from the electricity we use when we are, from generating the electricity we use when we are manufacturing, and that result from the fossil fuels that we burn when we transport materials around the world and products around the world. As you all know, CO2 emissions are the main driver of climate change. Yes, CO2 emissions are the main driver, and fossil fuel burning is how we get most of our CO2 emissions. But the number 2 source of CO2 emissions is deforestation, and we in the furnishings industry use a lot of wood, so have a large responsibility for halting deforestation. We in this industry also have a large responsibility for reducing indoor air pollution, which is our indoor air quality is often compromised by the presence of volatile organic compounds which come from our furnishings. And these VOCs, like formaldehyde, are one of 5 classes or groups of harmful chemicals that are very common in furnishings and are known to be compromising our health and that of other life on our planet. The textiles industry is particularly chemical intensive, and all the hazardous chemicals that occur in furnishings can occur in textiles. The leather tanning industry is also chemically intensive, and specifically the chromium salts that are used in tanning leather often are sources of pollution of our waterways. Cotton is also very chemically intensive to cultivate, and that connects to one of the social equity issues that are frequently hidden in our industry and in others. Many are surprised to learn that cotton is cultivated with forced labor in 19 countries to this day, according to the ILO. Finally, we throw away an awful lot of furniture. At this time, furniture is about 6% of waste in our municipal landfills, and textiles make up another 6% or so. So you can see here that we are connected to all these different sustainability issues. And we at Sustainable Furnishings Council do our best to address these issues with our initiatives, including the What's It Made Of initiative that we're working with partners, and which is to raise awareness about this handful of hazardous chemicals that is commonly found in furnishings. All of these are persistent in the environment and directly related to problems in our human health. Another initiative we're working is the Wood Furniture Scorecard, where we are assessing retailers' wood sourcing policies, looking at how proactively they are ensuring that they're doing their part to take care of the forests of the world. We're working on the 2020 assessments now, and this scorecard will be published in October. We have an emerging initiative in circularity. Waste reduction is a big concern of ours and has been from the beginning. So I was interested to learn a few years ago about this circularity roadmap open source tool available to you on the internet, and it's interactive, so you can mouse over and learn more about what the issues are in collections, in reuse, in recycling for textiles specifically. And this is very much what we're going to be discussing today. And it turns out that Karla Magruder, one of our guests today, was an advisor as this little tool was being developed. The work we do is important because the planet is in such trouble. You are looking here at how temperatures have varied from normal since early in the Industrial Revolution, and you can see that the planet is warming up. And it's warming up because of this proliferation of greenhouse gases. And one of the things we will be discussing today is the fact that circularity does reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm very pleased to introduce our guest today. Karla Magruder has been in the textile industry for more than 30 years and has global experience with fiber and finished garments all the way along the supply chain. She's worked in developing strategies, bringing new products to market, and convening groups to accelerate growth and to accelerate circularity. She founded Fabricology and has consulted to a range of clients, and she's also a founder of Accelerating Circularity, which has this mission to establish systems that will use the embedded value and resources in existing textiles for new products, reducing the millions of tons of textile waste annually going to landfills and supporting the reduction of the industry's greenhouse gas emissions. James Ewell is North American Sustainable Chemistry Practice Lead for Antithesis Group. He helps clients to gain transparency on the chemicals used in their supply chains, identify chemicals of concern, and optimize product composition for human and environmental health. He supports brands and their suppliers to collect, assess, and communicate important information about the substances they use. And prior to his role at Antithesis, James was Senior Director of Green Blue's Sustainable Materials Program. That's where we met. He was responsible for managing the development and practical implementation of its sustainable materials management framework. James has had oversight for all of Green Blue's tools, particularly clean ingredients and development of Material IQ. He's also part of the core team that authored the chemical management module for the Outdoor Industry Association, which was integrated into the Sustainable Apparel Coalition's HIG Index. So welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Susan. I really appreciate the invitation and really happy to be here and get to talk to the audience today about accelerating circularity. I'm going to give a brief introduction about what we do, and James is going to sort of get into a little bit more detail about our work. So if we can flip to the next slide. So we actually have a pretty simple mission, which Susan alluded to. Our goal really is to divert textile waste out of the landfill. You know, she had mentioned the textile waste is about 6%. I've heard numbers that go as high as 10% of landfill. So it depends on location, it depends on where, but it's a significant number and certainly big enough that the you know, municipalities, we need to get that waste out of landfill. So the idea is that we will help divert waste out of landfill, textile waste from landfill, and to move it to circular supply chains. And we're looking specifically to textile supply chains. And for us to do that, we believe that we have to do a lot of research. We're going to create some maps so that we know, some models and maps, what would a circular supply chain look like. We know today that we're missing some of the links that are required for circularity. So our goal is to research, map this out, figure out what the links are, where the gaps are, what can we do to help create those links, and then to run pilots to actually confirm that the circular systems are functioning. So, and after we do that, we're going to report on all this. We'll actually report along the way. We're focused specifically on both chemical and mechanical recycling, because we think that you need all types of recycling for truly circular supply chains. We are focused on polyester and cellulosic materials. Between those two materials, or, you know, when I say cellulosics, that's cotton, viscose, and those types of materials. We're looking at over 85% of the entire textile fiber market. So we're really dealing with the largest group of textile fibers by addressing those. So if you move to the next slide. it's important when we start to talk about circularity. I'd love to hear how many people are part of the Sustainable Furnishings Council. It takes everybody to make this happen. So Accelerating Circularity is a neutral body. We're not biased to one technology or another, one collection system or another. We believe that we need as many as we possibly can, but you need somebody who's unbiased that can come in and say, these are the things that we need to see happen. We're inclusive, we're very collaborative. People have talked about collaboration for a long time, and I think they've dragged their feet a little bit. But I think one of the things that we're seeing now is people recognize that to make something circular, it's going to take an entire supply chain, but it needs everybody's input to make it happen. So it has to be an industry-wide effort. For instance, if a recycling technology finds a way to get some feedstock and to actually make some new product out of that, they've got to be able to do that over time, consistently, with enough volume that it's going to make business sense for them. What we really need to do is we need to look at it as a whole. Where is all that waste going? How do we get it sorted into the right feedstocks for a multitude of different recyclers? We're very focused in our initiative. I think you can see that already. It's textiles to textiles. It's, our first research is on the East Coast of the United States. We're going after very specific fibers. So the group that we put together is very clear on what our strategy is. And we're also very action-based and results-oriented. We jokingly say we're a do tank. We're doing things. We are not just talking about this. We want to see things happen. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who can attest to the fact that I'm a pretty impatient human. James is going to smile when he sees that. If we move on to the next slide, we use, on the next slide, we use this image to help us explain what we're doing and where in the supply chain we work. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there's a blue bar, and that blue bar is the existing textile supply chain. And that functions obviously very well today. We actually make way too much product, right? It functions at scale, it functions at the price points that allow it to function at scale. And of course, we put this supply chain in a circle because that's what we want it to be. And you can see the slices on the right-hand side encompass everything from reuse and repair, waste collection, sorting, things like shredding. That's actually should be labeled feedstock conversion because there's many things that need to be done potentially to product besides shredding. And then you've got chemical innovators and mechanical innovators. These are the areas that we need to work within. Now, accelerating circularity does not work in reuse and repair, but if we left that out, there would be a lot of people that would say to us, why aren't you paying attention to that? So we're paying attention to it, but it's not within the remit of the work that we do. We start at waste collection. We want to know what's in waste, how it gets collected, how it gets sorted. And these are not easy steps, but the important thing I think for us to understand is that if we can connect these steps and we connect it with technologies that will allow us to move right into the existing supply chain, that's going to allow us to actually scale relatively quickly. And when I say that relatively quickly, that's compared to developing a fiber that's from say agricultural waste. If you have to develop a fiber from agricultural waste, you're going to have to develop every step of the supply chain, including does it dye, does it sew, can you wash it and wear it? So they have to, those fibers will also have to be commercialized on both sides of this circle. So we think in that sense, we have a little bit of an advantage there. So next slide, I think. this is where we move on to James. I want to make one last point before, sorry, James, is that we have a working group meeting that meets once a month, and we actually work. It's a relatively small group. We did that intentionally so that we could stay on target and we didn't get sidetracked into lots of other people having different ideas, and we need to do that. We've all agreed on what our strategy is, and we continue to follow that. What we've done is when we talk about collaboration, we work with a lot of other organizations, like we're working here with the Sustainable Furnishings Council, and this allows us the opportunity to tell people what we're doing, to tell them what we see happening, what needs to happen, and get feedback. Are we going the right way, or do we need to make some adjustments? Are there things that somebody else has thought of that we haven't? So we're happy to be here today and participate in this conversation and hopefully get your feedback and input. Thanks. James?
Thanks, Karla. Appreciate the summary. So as Karla mentioned in her overview of accelerating circularity, one component of the project is to research and identify these gaps that we believe we may need to create linkages to help overcome some of those gaps if we think they're obstacles for creating greater circularity in the textile industry. So collection and sorting is one phase of end of life that is really key, and that's probably pretty obvious, but I thought I'd make a couple of points about it. On the post-consumer side, we're looking at both post-consumer and post-industrial. And on the post-consumer side for apparel, there have been some pretty real significant growth in creating the market for re-commerce, is what you'll typically hear. So those products have high reuse potential, and they are doing a really good job of creating economic rationale for reusing those materials. For other industries, post-consumer opportunities for reuse are not very evident. There's very little harvesting of materials from contract and residential furniture. There are some existing secondary markets for like refurbishing contract furniture, but very little of the textile waste is getting recycled. So that's one area that we would seek to address as an opportunity. So on the post-industrial side, there is a lot of opportunity, and in many ways, post-industrial is an ideal feedstock for building the foundation for circularity in the textile industry. One is there's a good concentration of producers in the eastern U.S., as Karla said, and especially in the southeastern states. And the waste streams are much more homogeneous than what we see in post-consumer apparel materials that need extensive sorting. So that's an advantage. Other advantages for post-industrial are that the manufacturers that are producing the feedstock can tell brokers or recyclers exactly what is in the materials that they're supplying to them and what they're made out of, and that's very important for the processors. So we often say that post-industrial waste is the training wheels for circularity. We start there, and getting that right will help us to maximize opportunities for post-consumer as well. Next slide. So some of the other linkages, if we look at how waste is typically handled in the United States, we have these traditional waste haulers. And right now, they're not involved in conveying textile materials to recycling, or not on a scalable level. And one reason for that is Waste Management, Republic, and other large commercial waste haulers have invested a lot of money in putting materials in the holes in the ground. So if we're going to change that model, then they have to have an economically profitable options in order to change how they do business. But once that option, or once those options exist, I think we can be sure that they'll seek to leverage their extensive collection infrastructure to collect these feedstocks and get them to recyclers. And, you know, obviously we can scale the collection of post-industrial textile waste. We just are not harnessing it yet. So that's one reason for us to produce a map, if you will, for where the economic opportunities exist. Lastly, I just wanted to mention, it's not related to post-industrial, but there's some very interesting research and trials that are taking place in Europe for developing technologies that can more rapidly sort post-consumer apparel goods, which will help to reduce the labor costs involved and put some improvements there. I keep wanting to forward my slide. Next slide.
And James, if you could maybe get more consistently close to your microphone.
Oh, okay. Let me,
That's good.
yeah, is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. So part of the Accelerating Circularity project is to identify these critical links that must be created in order to convert textiles waste into new textile products. And a part of this is understanding the capabilities of different recycling processes to achieve textile to textile recycling. And as Karla said, we're looking at both mechanical and chemical recycling technologies. So far, our toolkit has consisted mostly of mechanical recycling processes, and the overwhelming majority of recycled polyester yarns has come not from the textile industry, but from clear PET bottle flake. In fact, yarn producers have been the primary or the biggest consumers of clear PET bottle flake. So these producers, they want to find recycled materials. We're trying to understand how we can provide those materials to them from textile waste. There's also been a nascent but growing market for utilizing clean polyester textile waste in non-woven applications, so things like insulation, automotive shoddy, filtration media, those kinds of things. So that industry has the potential to grow. Cotton producers have been made progress in mechanically recycling colored cotton waste. So that's been promising. And then Unify, who, as everybody knows, is a big fiber and yarn producer, has been really pushing the envelope on maximizing the utility of recycling polyester fabrics, not just post-industrial waste, but also post-consumer garments, apparel garments, which I just learned recently. But at the end of the day, there are some unavoidable limitations for mechanical recycling for most of the textile waste that is produced. And materials that are made, for example, from blended yarns and fabrics, or have been dyed or pigmented, have finishing treatments like those that Susan mentioned in her presentation, as well as backings. Those are not good feedstocks for mechanical recycling right now. And it's clear that we need more flexible technologies in order to convert textiles back into textile inputs. Next slide. So we're looking at both of these classifications of recycling. In general, there is a growing interest in the capabilities of chemical or what many of us are calling advanced recycling technologies. And there are several very promising technologies for recycling our target fibers, which, as Karla said, of polyester, cotton, and man-made cellulosics. So on the polyester side, there are several companies that can recycle polyester textile back into its monomers, which are the basic building blocks to make new polyester resin. There are also a few companies that have created processes for separating out polyester from non-polyester textile materials, and then removing the colorants and additives, or most of the additives, to produce a relatively clean polymer. So those are often called those processes are dissolution. There are also several technologies for recycling cellulosics back into new fibers. And I listed 3 here that you might want to keep your eye on in the future: Evernew, Worn Again, and Lensing. And Lensing is a manufacturer who is part of our core group for this project. So we've been learning a lot from them. And then lastly, but equally important, is that there are technologies that can recycle other synthetic yarns and fabrics into useful end products. Some of these that are pretty hard to recycle. So some of them can be feedstocks for making new polymers like polypropylene and polyethylene, while others like acrylic, nylon 6,6, and polyurethanes can be converted into basic chemicals that can be used to make other products, just not textile products. Next slide. So I put this slide in here because I thought it might be a useful reference. I think, Susan, people are gonna, you'll send the slide deck out to people?
Yes, it will be available to you. Yeah.
So I thought this was, this is something that Accenture put together, but I thought it was a nice, simple summary of the different classifications of chemical recycling or advanced recycling, some that I just mentioned. So you'll see the kinds of materials that can go into dissolution versus depolymerization, and that's how you harvest monomers back out of polymers. And then what they call cracking is what we would call conversion. And you can produce substances that go back into the plastic supply chain. It's not just syngas and synthetic oil, but it is helping to produce things that go back into the raw material stream, the petrochemical stream. Next slide. So I just wanted to mention, since Susan had shown me this slide earlier, that in addition to our efforts to find safer alternatives to many of the chemicals that fall within these functional classes of chemicals, a lot of my work is centered around that effort. One of the advantages of advanced recycling is that these kinds of chemistries are not an obstacle to producing virgin quality end product. So they can remove these. And then of course there's a question about where they end up after that and what kinds of emissions. And that's something that some of us are doing research on now to try to help understand better what the fate of those chemicals are as byproducts. Next, I think I got one more slide. Yes. So I wanted to close with an appeal to all manufacturers who might be tuning into this webinar, that we need your help. As Karla said, it's going to take everyone contributing to this effort to make sure that we have a good handle on what it will take to build a more circular system and helping us achieve our mission of textile recycling. So we need some fundamental data to help us better understand how to recycle the diversity of textile waste that is being produced. And we've created surveys for post-industrial sources. We have 2 surveys. One is for fiber and yarn, and the other one is for fabrics, finishes, and treatments and printing. There are only 12 questions for each of the surveys. So please, if you will, take the time to contribute to this important research and help us figure this out. Thank you.
I would actually also add, there are actually many more surveys that we're doing, those 2, but we also have one for finished products. We have one for brands and retailers, if there happen to be any chemical recyclers on the line. So there actually is a whole host of them, depending upon where you are, because we need that information actually from everybody.
Yeah, good point.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you both. So we'll leave this slide up as we begin to take questions, because we really do want everybody who is on this webinar to take those 12 minutes or whatever it would take to do the survey and give the information that'll make possible for us to recycle more. Okay, first question. Attempting to industrialize could be a daunting task. How could the model leverage local collaboration, that is, local government, small business, artisans, etc., to establish a more realistic and manageable strategy? What thoughts do you have on that?
Actually, I have to say, I just spoke with someone earlier today who is doing, in a sense, just that. So they are collecting and making things all in one region. It happens to be North Carolina. And I think it's a fantastic effort. And they are pulling together a variety of different business types. So furniture, fabric, yarn spinning, and trying to really develop that locally. And I think that those are very valid efforts. A number that I didn't mention is, I don't think, or maybe I did, it's about 17 million tons of textile waste that are going into landfill every year. We recycle and go back to textiles about less than 1% of that. And so while it's important that everybody do what they can, and I applaud those efforts, in our conversation today, the gentleman was like, oh, it's so great to know you, because at some point there are things that they can't work with, or there's more than they can handle. So we have to look at this with in a sense, the issues at scale become the opportunities that we need to look at.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Next question, in what ways can consumers support the circular model? Also, some people may not know what polyester even is. What recommendations do you have to raise consumer awareness? I will say that we at Sustainable Furnishings Council like to put effort on raising consumer awareness and have ongoing efforts to continue to raise consumer awareness about all these things. So perhaps you'll hear our ambassadors talking about this soon. But what do y'all think? In what ways can consumers support the circular model? And maybe talk a little bit about looking at a label, so knowing that it's polyester, and maybe remembering then that it comes from petroleum.
Well, actually, I think the first thing that we have to get the consumers to recognize is they are the provider of the feedstocks for a circular supply chain. So they have to get into the habit of returning their products to us. In terms of having them understand what polyester is, maybe James would he could answer that, technically speaking, better than I am. And it's always fun to get somebody like James who can take something technical and say it for all of us. But the consumer, one of the things that I believe wholeheartedly is that the consumer obviously needs to understand that their material is going to be the feedstock for their next iteration of product, right? So they have to participate in a circular supply chain if they really want one. But on the flip side of that, I also believe that, this is difficult. We're professionals here, and it's not easy for us. So I think the messages that we need to tell need to be quite simple and quite clear, and without too much, finger pointing, shaking, that it's their responsibility. They're not the ones that have created this problem, in essence.
Yeah, I think there is obviously a lot of education that needs to happen at the societal level, because it's not just industry that is responsible for creating a circular economy. And the more dispersed goods are, the harder it gets to find economically viable ways to bring the materials back into the system. So, you can mine an office building a lot more economically than you can going to individual homes, as an example. But so first step is to educate consumers that, in World War II, people had a very different relationship to materials than we do now. They saw all materials as valuable and were very hesitant to throw away something because they knew it had inherent value. So we have to kind of return to some of that, but consumers also need outlets to do something they can't do, by themselves. So there's an awesome opportunity for entrepreneurs out there to help fill in some of the gaps that Karla and I were talking about, to help get those materials, from where they're being generated and back into productive use. And I think you're going to see more of that. But there's no reason for furniture can be harvested, not just the textiles, but all the other materials. And
exactly.
You'll probably see material reutilization centers that expand beyond just packaging to, deal with carpet, furniture, bedding, lots of other stuff, as long as there's an outlet. And so, sort of order of operations, the part of the project that we're working on is sort of bottom up. How can we assign economic value to those materials so people are motivated to get them to where they need to be?
Yeah. Well, we do have some motivated people on the call on our webinar today. A designer asking about textile companies and how active textile companies are. Are textile companies transferring used memos to some central place? Are there major textile companies actively working to recycle? Because as a designer, I'd like to support those companies and let them know why I'm supporting them.
We'd like to know too.
I was going to say the same thing, James. We're doing that research now. We're out there and we're talking to, actually, James is talking to a lot of these people on the supply chain. It's the surveys is one way to get that information in, and then just actual one-on-one phone calls. So one of the things that we will be doing in our group is that as we collect this data and this information, we will be developing reports. Those reports will be public. So if this is something that you're interested in, if you go to the website, there's also a place where you can, put your name in so that you are on the mailing list and you'll see these reports. And, as time goes on, there'll be more and different kinds of information as part of the reports.
Great. We'll be happy to let our reach know when those reports are out too. Another question about here's a question. Living in Staten Island, where there are landfills, and near Brooklyn, more landfills, how do I learn where recyclable items are going? Seems a secret. Do we know where things are landing as a personal consumer? And I know the city of New York actually would like to hear from this participant, because they do have an effort around circularity, and this very week there are circular city events going on virtually.
It's a really interesting thing. So, when you donate used textiles to, many of the charities that are out there, what'll happen is they will take those, they will sort them. And those sorted textiles will go into their stores. The things that are viable will go into the stores. But even that material that goes into the stores, only about, I think the number is about 20% of those items actually get sold. And so all of the rest of that stuff then finds new homes. And those homes can go anywhere from being exported for further sorting. They can be used in the United States for going into things like trunk liners and carpet pads and mattress fillings. So depending upon where the product, what the product is, will depend on what happens to it, whether or not it can be reused and resold, whether or not it just gets shipped out of the country. So there are several different pathways today. One of the things I think that's important about our work is we're actually looking to get material that is not in that stream because they have homes already, or, you know, maybe there's some differences. There will be some change over time, but we're also looking to deal with people. I think James mentioned, you know, people like Waste Management and Republic who are picking up our waste. Certainly we can't put textiles in our regular waste because then it turns into a wet, soggy mess. So there needs to be new systems that happen that will allow for really big circularity scaled.
Yeah. Well, this next question might relate to those systems. This question, is natural fiber like pineapple fibers, banana fibers, etc., mixed with non-woven fabric considered as a recycled content product in textiles?
So you mean using agricultural chaff, waste product, and including yarns with traditional?
This question comes from the Philippines, where fiber is made from pineapple fiber, and you know and abaca is there. And so I think the question is, what if you mix some pineapple fiber with non-woven fabric? Is it considered recycled content?
So in the United States, the FTC has a description of what recycled means. And so what recycled means is the product has to be taken out of the waste stream. It has to be something that was in a waste stream and taken out of that waste stream and found new life. So not being very clear on how that pineapple fiber was derived. Was it taken out of a waste stream and used and turned into something new?
Yeah, good point.
There is a definition, and you can Google that. It's on the FTC website. And then whether or not you're able to get a designation from some of the certifying companies about what recycled means, they do. Those designations are also based off of the FTC basic definition.
If you want to address the environmental benefits, I would not stress, because I think it's questionable about whether that can be called recycled content, but it has some clear carbon benefits, you know, over some other choices. So I
good. Emphasize the carbon benefits in that case. Good. Is there a list of recycling companies that designers can access to recycle furnishings and fabrics in different U.S. cities? I know that the North Carolina Department of Environment has had in the past a resource on their webpage, and I know the EPA website has had some resources in the past, but and we have Sustainable Furnishings Council has a waste reduction resource guide that includes those, and I know the EPA website has certainly moved things around in recent years. So I wonder whether you, Karla, and you, James, have info about a list of resources for designers, or for anybody who wants to keep things out, or, you know, wants to look for more ways to recycle something that might be coming from a design project, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, right now, so we're focused on the textile portion of products and, you know, furniture's complex product. I don't, besides the resources that you mentioned, Susan, which is great, there are, I think you're going to see the network of refurbishers that mostly are dealing with contract interiors and that furniture segment expand, because they know how to disassemble furniture and harvest the materials out of them. So I would expect those companies to ramp up if they see incentive and money in doing it.
I think you're right. And as mattress recycling is mandated in several states now, I think we are going to see more being handled by those facilities that are handling mattress recycling and more of those sorts of facilities in other states. Yeah. If someone's asking about the best way to reach you, I bet they can reach you through acceleratingcircularity.org. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. And you can also reach them through, oh, well, I was going to make sure we had the slide that had some information about Sustainable Furnishings Council and what we offer, because at this admin at sustainablefurnishings.org, you can get a range of questions answered too. Somebody says, this is so encouraging. I often feel lost in my struggle to save items from the landfill. And the question is, we reupholster furniture on a large scale. For instance, we have contracts with airports, universities, healthcare. All of them are excited to reuse their furniture instead of buying new. My question is, how do we divert the fabric we take off all this furniture from going to the landfill?
Oh, fill out our survey. We want to know about all that.
Good.
That's wonderful. I mean, I imagine, again, as James had said before, they probably have potentially, FR finishes or stain repellent finishes, which, would maybe make that limited, but, we want to know about it. And these are the kinds of things that we're looking for so that we know where they are and the volumes that are available, because that's going to make us be able to hook. That's how we start hooking up the supply chain, right?
Yeah.
When we know where things are, we know what we can get consistent feedstocks, because just like the traditional supply chain, if we're going to be working with recyclers, chemical or advanced material recyclers, they're going to have feedstocks that are going in on a regular basis. And so for them to get to be commercial, they're going to have to know that there is a path for materials on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs need the same transparency as any other business you would think of, that they want to know what the size of the market is, what the cost of inputs are for them, and then what they can sell the outputs, what the market will be. So we can't do that without, like in the example you just gave, what materials are you using? And we, if we understand that, we can try to help you figure out where the best home for those is.
Great. Well, just to go back to this survey slide, you mentioned that there's several surveys here, and someone is asking, I'm an interior designer and work on my own. I'm not sure which survey to take. They appear to be for manufacturers. Did you say there is a survey for retailers? That might be appropriate for designers too. What do y'all think? What would you like the designers to fill?
There's a brand and retailer survey. And so, I think that would be more along that line, because they can talk about what they're doing for circularity. What we're looking for in all of our surveys is to understand what the market is doing when it comes to circularity. Do they have materials? Do they have a process? Are they doing something that's going to encourage circularity? At what kind of scale? With what type of materials? So those are all the parts of information that we need to collect. I think James had talked about it before. We need to know what's going in and coming out of every step of the supply chain. We're looking at our work very much on a systems basis. There are a lot of people that are working on, commercializing sorting technology or commercializing the recycling technologies. Our job is just to understand what everybody needs so that we can connect the links.
Great. And another designer is asking, can we ask manufacturers of furnishings to ensure that a certain percentage of things manufactured by their company are totally using post-consumer materials? Absolutely, you can ask manufacturers that. They may or may not be able to provide it promptly, but you all as designers, as interior designers, working with a range of manufacturers and working directly with consumers, are in a key position. You can influence the behavior of manufacturers and you can influence the behavior of the consumer. So absolutely, you can ask manufacturers to ensure that some percentage is recycled or reclaimed. You can also ask manufacturers to tell you what they're doing to reduce waste to landfill. That'll be interesting information for you to have as their customer, and it's the kind of information that is probably going to turn up on the survey some too, if that manufacturer will take the survey, so you can send the manufacturer to this survey too.
And I would just add to that, Susan, that to that person's question, don't wait post-consumer so much that you're missing the opportunity. We really need to utilize post-industrial, and that is the low-hanging fruit right now.
Yeah.
Because there's much higher costs involved in post-consumer. So if we prove that this is viable on the post-industrial side, post-consumer will definitely follow. But we've got to, we have to build the market somehow.
Yeah, good.
Those training wheels. I think James, you've used that term before, the post-industrial is sort of training wheels to get us moving. We have to make this happen, we have to be a little mercenary, I would say, in a funny way. There are things that we know that are going to be much more easy to get into a circular supply chain. So we make that step first. And then we find out that certain things work and somebody gets a little bit more sophisticated and we go to that next level. We're not going to go to 100% recycled, totally circular, in one fell swoop. So we have to be realistic in our expectations so that we can really make things happen.
Yeah. So a couple of questions about making things happen. One designer is saying, is it really true? Are there no current places to send used textiles right now? Well, there are places to send used textiles right now. You can contact your local municipal solid waste facility and you can ask them, where can I recycle textiles in this community? And they might send you to a reuse place. Uh-oh, I've got an echo.
Yeah, and depending on what those textiles are, some of them can be thrown into, bins that go, it depends on where you are. They can go in bins that recycle textiles for, recycle clothing textiles, but those will get sorted out and sent somewhere else. In some instances, in some places that works, so that it still goes into a recycling stream, depending upon what the material is.
Yeah, but if it's 100% polyester or 100% cotton, that would be certainly be valuable, wouldn't it?
Yeah, those are valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that people can do is call hotels in your area and ask them if they have a recycling program for cotton. And if you can drop off a bag, depending what your textile is. And if you've got a manufacturer of polyester fabric or yarns, ask them if they're recycling and if you can donate your materials to wherever they're sending it.
Good. And samples can often be sent back to the manufacturer. So that's for little bits, you can use that. What about leather? Is leather pertinent to your survey? Do you also include leather products?
No,
sorry. We're not working on leather right now.
I know.
Okay. Sustainable Furnishings Council has a member that is working on leather, and they're creating a product called Inspire Leather, and we would be happy to connect them for leather scrap that participants might have. Another question about the survey: would you be interested in international companies? Absolutely, to fill out, or are you just researching US? But I think absolutely. It's such an international industry.
Sure.
Definitely.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Is donating of yarns to textile universities considered post-industrial? That is, if we say we donate yarns to a university, is the university using post-industrial waste? And this is a textile company. I guess
It depends on what the university does with it. If they're donating yarns and there's nothing wrong with those yarns, it's kind of interesting that you would call it post-industrial. I mean, you know, if they're yarns, they're good and they use it to make, you know, run trials on things. I'm not sure that that's exactly post-industrial waste use.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's great for them to be used.
It is great for them to be used. And one of the things about it's industrial waste if the industry is throwing it away somehow, throwing it out of their operation. So if it is, perhaps if it's yarn that would have to go to the landfill because they've got to get it out of the factory, then maybe that can be considered post-industrial. I think
Well,
maybe that
to a university, if you're a company that makes yarn and you're donating it to university, you don't want to think of it as waste because you can probably get a tax write-off for the real value of the yarn.
Good point. Good point. I think that might be all our questions, and it is certainly all our time. Thank you all very much for your time, for your attention throughout the hour, but especially thank you, Karla and James, for all the expertise you have shared with us and for doing this very important work. I know we're all going to benefit, so thank you.
Thanks for having us, and thanks everybody on the line for participating.
Yep. Bye, everybody.
Bye now. Join us again, same time next month for another exciting and useful webinar. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you. Bye, Susan.
Bye.